Hi, everyone. This is David, and welcome to today's live stream on April 6th, 2020, in which we're going to conduct a midterm review of our sentence combining course that we've been focused on for the past 5 weeks. And we'll also take up any of the questions that you have about writing and research. As you can see, I've already have quite a few questions from the pre-chat, and I look forward to answering those. So let's go ahead and get started on our sentence combining midterm review. And I've been getting a lot of really excellent work from homework from you guys, and I look forward to going over it in just a moment. But first comes this midterm review. I'm going to kind of take us through everything we've done so far, remembering how this originally began. It was a student whose doctoral supervisor said to him, Your writing is of the high school level. In order to graduate from this course in this program, you have to improve the level of your writing. So I asked that student to provide me a sample of his professor's writing, and he did. Here's a article in the Architectural Science Review that professor had published. And I did a little textual analysis on it, as you can see in the box in the middle, using words analysis tools. And you'll notice the following things: that in this 300-word passage, there were 10 sentences and approximately 30 words per sentence. And the flesh reading ease was 14.1, as you see on the scale over here. That places it very, very low, which means difficult to read on the college graduate level. 0 is the bottom of the chart, where the difficulty can no longer be measured by this particular scale. And this piece of writing is only 14 points away from that. We also conducted, as you see here, a Flesch-Kincaid grade level, and as expected, this grade level of 17 places it in the academic paper level on grade 17, which is the next to last grade. So this writing represents some very difficult writing from, as expected, in an academic journal, kind of the highest level of academic writing. And I compared that to the paper that the student had submitted and was told that the writing is not good enough. And so I applied the same analysis to a 300-word section of the student's paper. And here's what I found. As you can see, there are approximately the same number of sentences, 12. The big difference is in the professor's paper, there were 30 words per sentence. In the student's paper, there were 15 words per sentence. But everything else is pretty much the same. So I wanted to see exactly what was going on here. The Flesch-Kincaid scale says that the average number of words for an academic paper on this level is 29. So I went out and gathered, I think, six academic journal articles from various disciplines, selected approximately a 300-word passage from each. And as you can see, the sentences were kind of the same, except for this Cambridge journal. And indeed, for all of the professional journals, you can see that there is indeed an average of 29 words per sentence. And look how the student stands out at 15 words per sentence. And everything else remains the same. So the question became, how do I get this student and all other students to raise their words per sentence up to that 29, 28 words per sentence level that is expected on this level, the graduate level of academic writing? And the method that I found and I had used earlier in teaching undergraduate students was sentence combining. Sentence combining simply means that you undergo training to manipulate the 7 most common sentence parts. These are not parts of speech. These are actually syntactic units. And those units are relative clauses, participle phrases, appositives, and absolutes. And that is the first half of our course. And we have covered those four parts already. To go, we have prepositional infinitive phrases. I'm going to divide those into two units: noun substitutes and subordinate clauses. I'm going to probably add another unit called subordination and coordination. So we're going to study about 8 or 9 different lessons here. As I said, we've covered the first 4: relative clauses, participle phrases, appositives, and absolutes. Sentence combining basically means this: that you take 2 sentences or more and use these structures to combine them into one. Here's a simple example. Tears are nature's way to keep our eyes wet and cleansed. They're actually drops of saline fluid secreted by a gland. And we can combine those using a relative pronoun. Tears, comma, which are actually drops of saline fluid secreted by a gland, are nature's way to keep our eyes wet and cleansed. We can place that an appositive on either side. We can either make drops of saline the main focus, or we can make nature's way the main focus simply by altering which one is in the relative clause or subordinate clause, subordinate structure. And here's another way of doing it. What this slide shows is that there are multiple ways of combining any 2 sentences. And you choose among those ways based upon what works best in the piece of writing that you are doing. The benefits of sentence combining: first, there's quite a bit of evidence that sentence combining does indeed work to substantially improve a person's, a writer's syntactic maturity. And syntactic maturity simply means the ability to use a variety of sentence parts, sentence types. That in turn improves the quality of writing by making your writing more clear when you don't have as many sentences, but indeed use sentence structure, sentence combining, to make some parts the main focus and other parts the subordinate focus. Important revision tool. And it gives your writing more authority, because once you achieve these higher levels of syntactic maturity, your writing is more acceptable, more recognized in the academic community or academic discourse, giving it more authority. There's no doubt about that. So in our first lesson, we covered relative clauses, which are replacements for nouns with relative pronouns: which, that, who, whom, and whose. And we looked at relative clauses such as this one: the earliest Mesopotamian developed the first plow. The plow increased their harvest. 2 separate thoughts expressed in 2 sentences, but maybe one is less important than the other, depending upon what you're writing. So you identify the redundancy, in this case, the noun, the plow, and you combine the sentences together, placing the emphasis on the part that you think works best for you. The earliest Mesopotamians developed the first plow. And now we have the kind of definition of what it did. So we can say, which increased their harvest. You can also make that into a participle, in increasing their harvest. Again, you have all of these options. You choose the one that is best for you. When it came to relative pronouns, we paid special attention to the difference between which and that, because it is the source of some errors in writing. There are 2 primary differences between which and that. And those differences are: 1, the word that is always restrictive. It is always limiting. In other words, it is information which is needed to identify the noun it follows. And that is why the word that is never preceded by a comma. And of course, which is the opposite. Which can be either restrictive or non-restrictive, limiting or non-limiting, needed or not needed, and therefore can be sometimes preceded by a comma. Those are the 2 big differences between which and that. Which can go a lot of different ways. That can only go one way, restrictive, no comma. So that was one of the big distinctions we made with relative pronouns. Then we went on to participles. Participles are, as you know, are formed by adding ing to form the present continuous. And then to form the past continuous or the past participle, you make that verb in its participle, its past form, which is ed if it's a regular verb, ed or t. And then the irregular verbs, the one that are past participle, is formed by adding some form of the n or en suffix, and then the past participles that are formed by changing the vowel, such as swim and swam. So after defining what a participle is formed, we looked at how to use them. Here we have three, excuse me. The rich old man proved an easy target for romance scammers. He was confused. He was living alone. And we go from that kind of elementary approach to writing sentences to one that uses participles to better combine the sentences, placing the emphasis on the main clause, the rich man proved an easy target, and then the confused and living alone, adding the extra details, in this case, as an introductory participle. Confused and living alone, the rich old man proved an easy target. Remember that commas signal a half-second pause in your sentences. So you notice that when I read that, I gave that half-sentence pause at the sign of a comma. Confused and living alone, comma, the rich old man. And that's called an unfinished sentence. So therefore, I have a rising intonation on the end of it. Confused and living alone, it's unfinished. So it's rising intonation. The rich old man proved an easy target. And we can also place that participle anywhere we want in relationship to that noun. The rich old man, confused and living alone, proved an easy target. And notice how I paused and changed my intonation. The rich old man, confused and living alone, proved an easy target. Because it comes in the middle, we've got this rising, falling, rising intonation pattern. So that was the participle. They're very useful for adding details and for creating continuity. In other words, continuity means no longer having to break because there are these individual short sentences. The ideas attain a sense of flow to them that is quite helpful for your reader when they're trying to put things together. For their study, there's my half-second pause. For their study, rising intonation because it's unfinished. For their study, researchers gathered data from social media. They cataloged tweets, downloaded Instagram posts, and scraped public feeds. Well, we still have some redundancy there, don't we? They repeating researchers. That's okay sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with this construction that you see here. However, if you want to add even more continuity to the sentence, if you want to show an even closer relationship between the details that modify what the researchers did, you could do so with participles, constructing something like, for their study, researchers gathered data from social media. What did they do? Cataloging tweets, downloading Instagram posts, and scraping public feeds. And so you don't have to pause. The ideas are presented in a much more streamlined, continuous way that gives your writing that sense of flow to it. Participles are also good for signaling relationships. The Swedish team discovered physicians had used two different DSMs, Diagnostic Statistical Manual. The team eliminated a key dependent. So what is the relationship between those two sentences? One of our goals in sentence combining is to make the relationship between two sentences or sentence parts explicit instead of implicit. Implicit here is a cause-effect relationship. In other words, the cause-effect relationship is being hinted at. Well, that's not good enough. You want to bring out what the actual relationship is. So we would write something like, after discovering physicians had used two different DSMs, the Swedish team had to eliminate. And we can write it another way. Excuse me. We can also use participles at the end of the sentence. The participants began the experiment. They self-selected. Well, clearly, we need to signal, in this case, not a cause-effect relationship like with the physicians, but here this is more of a time relationship. First, they began, and now here's what they did as they began, self-selecting their role and finding a co-partner. Our third sentence construction part was an absolute. And an absolute you've probably not heard before. It's not something that's studied a lot in your writing classes and in your English learning classes. But quickly defined, an absolute is where you take a sentence and you either completely remove the be verb, or if it doesn't have a be verb, and if it has a finite verb, you change that finite verb to ing. An example: Debbie sat at a desk. Her eyes were red and scratchy with fatigue. So we see the be verb, we eliminate the be verb, and we attach them, and we have an absolute. Debbie sat at a desk, her eyes red and scratchy with fatigue. Now, if you've probably never ever uttered an absolute before in your life, so I encourage you to take these absolutes and read them out loud, observing the pauses, observing the intonation pattern, until absolutes become more familiar to you. Here's another one. The evening grew stormy. The wind gusted and white caps slammed against the shore. Well, it'd be much nicer. It'd be much more of a flow, much more impactful if those details about the wind and whitecaps were joined, and we can do so with an absolute by simply changing the finite verb, gusted and slammed, to a non-finite participle. The evening grew stormy. The wind gusting, and whitecaps slamming. And that, I would submit to you, is a much more detailed and coherent picture of the weather than the first one. So those are absolutes. Absolutes are especially useful for signaling cause, effect, and sequence. For example, here's a cause effect that is implied, and we can use an absolute to make the relationship explicit. The ship's hull was torn apart by an iceberg. The ship sank. Clearly, one caused the other. We can use an absolute to show that. Its hull torn apart by an iceberg, the ship sank. We also eliminated the redundant the ship, by replacing the first one with a pronoun. The next part that we studied was an appositive. An appositive, the word means put something next to something else. And in the case of writing, an appositive means placing modifiers next to the noun they modify. And we looked at these examples. The city struggled to control the diamondback moth by mass spraying entire neighborhoods. And then we have details that modify the moth. The diamondback moth is a pesticide-resistant insect. But remember, our modifiers are supposed to go next to the noun they modify. And so we have to resort to an appositive to do that. We eliminate the redundancy and we move those modifiers next to the noun they modify. The city struggled to control the diamondback moth, comma, a pesticide-resistant insect, comma, by mass spraying entire neighborhoods. And depending upon where the noun is, that is where we would place our modifier. For example, you can place the modifier at the beginning. It comes before the noun, but remember, as long as it's next to it, you're fine. A pesticide-resistant insect, comma, pause, rising intonation, unfinished. The diamondback moth has spread from Europe to the Americas. It can come in the middle. The diamondback moth, first observed in Illinois in 1854, can now be found rising, falling, rising. in the middle, and we can also place it at the end. The diamondback moth prefers the cabbage leaf, its preferred meal. So even in kind of quasi-scientific writing, which is in this case biology, I guess, or maybe environmental science, you can see how these sentence parts can be used even in academic writing, scientific writing, to clarify our writing. Appositives also can define, such as most studies in the hard sciences can be classified as quantitative research. And now we define quantitative research as a collection analysis of numerical data. These appositives can also explain. In other words, we don't have to have a separate sentence to explain something. We can connect the thing and its explanation together, making our thought, our sentences more coherent, which means stuck together. In the past 5 years, notice our pause, the number of children diagnosed as autistic by age 2 has increased 25%, comma, a trend that began in the 1980s and accelerates yearly. So you would find that in a medical journal. I assure you, that's where I got it. I got it from a medical journal where we use an appositive to further define or explain, in this case, explain exactly what is meant without using another sentence. We can also use appositives to summarize both background and characteristics. Rust Belt cities of the North and Midwest, comma, cities that were decimated by the loss of factory, comma, are making a comeback in the information economy. So again, straight from academic writing, an appositive that is used to summarize or provide background information and characteristics without having to devote another sentence. And so if you count the number of words in that sentence, now you're getting close to what you need. How many words does that last sentence has? 1, 2, 3, 25 sentences. So it's getting up there to where it needs to be, around 28, 29 sentences. I believe the one in the middle has even more. I believe the one in the middle has about 29 words. So as you see, this sentence combining achieves our goal of giving our writing more syntactic maturity. Oh, here's another one. In Grimm's fairy tales for you literature people. And here we use an appositive as a list set off at the end of a sentence. Now, if you place a list at the end of a sentence, it must be set off with a colon, not a comma. A dash is really not used that much in academic writing, but a colon is the way to go there. Okay, so here's your homework. It is a group of sentences, and I want you, there are actually 2 pages to it. There are, I think, 30 sentences. And what I want you to do is to simply go through and combine sentences that you think can effectively be combined to make your writing more clear and more coherent and more mature. Now, along the way, you're going to have a chance to use a relative clause, a participle phrase, an absolute, and an appositive. Don't force it. Just know those opportunities are going to be there and use them if you think it helps your writing. Let me place this URL in the chat window for you guys. And here is the URL to the homework. And I have gotten some really great homework. Let me share some of that with you. So here is, oops, that's not showing very well. Let me do a different share. Okay, here we go. So here's some of the homework. Just some really excellent stuff. This was done on participle phrases. Let's look at another one. I'm getting much more involved than I wanted to get on this. Here's another one. This student did both appositives and participles together. Just perfect. As you can see with my comments, it says perfect. It was like a textbook answer. It was worked perfectly to do or accomplish the goals of sentence combining. Okay, Infected Chris just downloaded the homework. Okay, Chris, get started. Okay, let me stop the screen sharing here and let's go to the questions. Okay, thank you, Jadiv. So let's see who we have. Rama. Hey, Rama. We have Jadiv. Jadiv, I don't remember that you've been here before. If you have not, and you don't mind sharing, if you would tell us where you're from, at what level you're studying, and what you're studying. Jadiv wants me to explain tense. Yeah, tense in English refers to only two tenses in English, the present and the past, often called the simple present and the simple past. Now, there are a lot of variations of the simple present and the simple past. And those variations, I think there are 17 of them, but they are all built upon those two basic tenses. I swim every day, present, simple present. I swam every day last week. That is past. Now you can go into I will be swimming, the future continuous, and it goes on and on and on. Okay, here we have Ada, and I showed some of Ada's homework. Really excellent work. Thank you for getting that in, Ada. It worked really well. Infected Chris, hello. Oos, hello. And there's your. Okay, so I will go ahead and then answer these questions that were submitted on the community page of my YouTube channel when I asked students to submit pre-chat questions. Here's the first one I got. What would your advice be for someone struggling with writing up to a 2,500 word essay master's that is academically sound and not full of plagiarism? Here is my advice. Absolutely, the first thing that you should do is to get a full set of instructions from your professor for your master's thesis. The second thing I would do is to ask for, and you have a right to receive, examples of other students who have successfully written a master's thesis in this department, because you want yours to follow the same guidelines as theirs. So the first thing I would do would be to get my background, to get my assignment requirements from top to bottom. The second thing I would do would be to write a proposal, a research proposal. Even if you have not been asked to write a research proposal, I recommend that you write one anyhow and ask for feedback on it. Now, I have devoted one of these chats to writing a research proposal. And if you go to my YouTube channel, you will find that presentation. If you want that PowerPoint that I base the presentation on, let me know. I'll be happy to send you the PowerPoint. Then after writing your research proposal and getting feedback on it, you will know what to do. The second part of your question is academically sound. That's going to be taken care of by knowing the parts of a research proposal and understanding what is needed at each part. The plagiarism thing comes between knowing the difference between quoting and paraphrasing. There are only two ways that you can use a source when writing. You can either quote directly from it, or you can put it into your own words. And I believe it was in our last session last week, I devoted a part of that session to how to paraphrase without committing plagiarism. And so I would have you look up those two, the one I did last week, and then the one I did on research proposals, and I don't remember what week that was. So I forget who asked that question, but if that helped, let me know. If you need more explanation on some parts, let me know. If any of you have any questions about what I just said, please let me know. Let me see if there are any more questions about it. Okay. So if any questions come up about the answer I just gave, please let me know. Let's go to the next question. How do I answer this question on my essay? Critically analyze one health promotion theory and at least, all caps, or at least one framework used to explore principles of health promotion. First, I think that it's pretty clear what is meant by a theory. And I think you probably know how to go and get one. If not, I'll be happy to Google it for you and give you some. They're very easy to find. Now, the next thing I would do if I were you is to ask for, maybe you already know, what is meant by framework. Framework is one of those words often used in writing, and people can mean very different things by the word framework. One definition of framework is more than one theory combined and then presented and discussed. I don't think that is what is meant by framework here. Another definition of framework is strategy. So if someone sometimes, especially if you're in a corporation, and someone asks you for a research framework, what they're really asking for is a strategy. How will you go about conducting this research? What is your strategy for conducting and applying this research? And that's very different than the other definition of framework. So I think this, you put it in all caps because it's one of those things perhaps that needs some clarification. And the clarification needs to be what this person meant by the word framework here. Did that person mean a strategy? Or did that person mean a presentation of different theories? Any questions on that? Okay, heck. We'll go to the next question. How do I make a complete sentence after reading through a journal for writing a literature review in a dissertation? Excellent question. And it's one that everyone who's writing a literature review needs to ask themselves. Now, there are different types of literature reviews. So the first answer would be to the question, what type of literature review are you writing? There is the general literature review. In a general literature review, your goal is simply to summarize the sources that you find. You summarize virtually everything about them, from the problem to the problem as the research question or gap that they are investigating, to their methods, to the data they collected, to their analysis of the data, and to the conclusions that they drew from that data. So that's a general literature review where you kind of summarize, probably in about 250 words, that entire article. There's another kind of literature review, and that's called the focused literature review. In a focused literature review, your emphasis could be on methodology. Maybe this literature review fits into your dissertation or thesis by explicating or explaining or showing what are the different methodologies used to address this question, and which of those methodologies seem to be most efficacious to you. So there are really the two different kinds of literature reviews, general and focused. And so you need to know which type that you are writing in order to, as you say, provide a kind of complete summary. I think you meant summary instead of sentence there. A complete summary of the article that you read. Okay, questions about that? New comments. Yeah, systematic. That's another, money. Thank you for bringing that up. That is another way of saying focused or critical literature review. It goes by different names: focused literature review, critical literature review, systematic literature review. As far as I know, money, if someone told you that you're writing a systematic literature review, your logical next step is to say, please, sir or madam, can you define for me what you mean by a systematic literature review? I think I'm pretty clear on it, but I want to make sure that I am meeting your definition, that I am meeting your requirements. That's how I would handle that. Leon, hello, sir. No, Leon, just the opposite. Just the opposite. The literature review is one of the very first things that you do. I would say that you probably even do it before your research proposal. A lot of times you do. You need to get some kind of background before you can even write a research proposal. It's one of the very first things you do. Often literature reviews will reveal to you what exactly are the gaps that you need to fill, what exactly are the best research questions for you to take up in your thesis or your dissertation. I would definitely do the literature review before I did anything else. It really provides the basis of a lot of what you do. In other words, before you can do something, you need to know what others have done. And the way that you know what others have done is to write a literature review, conduct a literature review. Thank you. Money says, thanks, because when you go down the rabbit hole, yeah, exactly, money. All of these terms are used to mean different things depending upon what country you're in, what system of education you're in, and who the person is who's telling you. They vary enormously. Thank you, Money, for that follow-up comment. You're welcome, Leon. Where are you studying, Leon? I think you told me last time. You're studying in Malaysia or China? I forget which one it was. Okay, we have about 20 minutes left. Those were the questions that I received before the chat. So now would be a time to post the questions that you have now. Or give me an update on what you're doing. How's it going? I'm learning so much by doing these chats with you guys. I really appreciate all your questions and your participation. I had not done sentence combining since the 1990, yeah, 30 years ago. So it was really great to get back into sentence combining, and I'm looking forward to fabricating a course on sentence combining. Brunei, oh, okay, Brunei, thank you, thank you. Okay, Ada, how to answer, how to critic. Ada, can you rephrase that? I'm having trouble kind of following. How to answer, critically analyze, and/or. You talking about when somebody asks an and/or question? Because I hate it when teachers do that. Uh, and means that you have to do both, or means that you can choose one of the two. Choosing only to answer only one, as opposed to both, can be a fatal flaw. So when I see that and/or, I immediately say, why is the teacher introducing this level of ambiguity? And so I would make sure that if you're going to go the or route, that it is indeed fine for you to select only one. Infected Chris is learning Tagalog. I think they've changed the name of that to Filipino. And I think they have declared that to be the national language, one of the two national languages of the Philippines. Tagalog was originally a dialect in the Northern Islands. And because the Northern Islands were a power center in the Philippines, it became kind of the national standard, but was finally declared a national standard in, I think it's the 1970s or 1980s. And they changed the name to Filipino, I believe. Oh, Nemo, thank you, Nemo. Nemo says, in answer to that question, how to write an essay using critical analysis. Thank you, Nemo. The person, Ada, you asked that question. Is Nemo correct? Were you asking how to write an essay using critical analysis? If so, I'll be happy to take you through that. There's a very specific answer to that. Okay, Besbu asks, is it right that we have to make a variety of sentence lengths? No, Besbu, please do not think in terms of those kinds of generalities. You're thinking that will end up making the writing seem very artificial. Here are the criteria that you should think about. Is my writing clear? That is the number one criterion. And by clear, we mean coherent. That means the ideas flow together in a logical way. And by also clear, we mean that some ideas are emphasized in the main part of the sentence, and some ideas are subordinated to the main idea. Those are the only criteria you should think about. Besmu, that's a great question, Besmu. Besmu, you seem the kind of student who wants, you must be in sciences because you want these kind of, or prefer, I should say, you prefer these kinds of very general rules that cover all circumstances, almost like scientific laws. And I wish that writing had those kinds of universal scientific laws, but it does not. The only The only bad sentence is an unclear sentence, regardless of its length. The only to avoid, TOO, is a sentence that is too vague, too unclear, regardless of its length. Oh, so that was thank you, Nemo. Nemo, you deserve some of my pay today. I don't get paid for these. Oh, you're welcome, Besboo. So Ada, yes, let's go back to that question. How do you write a critical analysis? Here's how you write a critical analysis. In the introduction, you introduce the source, the topic, and the author whom you are analyzing. Then you set up a series of criteria by which you are going to conduct your analysis. In other words, before you conduct an analysis, you have to have the basis on which you will conduct or evaluate. An analysis really means an evaluation of, a deep dive into, a tearing apart of. And so you set up your criteria. You're going to look at the validity and the historical validity of methods used. Were these the right methods for this topic? You're going to be looking at the research question. Was the research question clearly defined and applied? You're going to be looking at data collection methods. Were the data collection methods authentic, and did they produce a genuine sample, a legitimate sample? And then you would look at the data analysis methods. Were the data analyzed in a methodical way? Were the standard analysis tools used correctly? And then you would look at the inferences drawn from the data. Were the inferences justified, or were there problems that make the inferences more qualified? So once you have your criteria set up, you simply apply them one by one. And then you conclude with a kind of overall evaluation of the article's usefulness or validity. Does that help? Now, I have a video on that, Ada, on my YouTube channel. It's how to write an evaluation essay, which is another name for a critical analysis. You're welcome, Besboo. Thank you for your great questions. In fact, and Chris, I think this is for Besboo. You never want to write an ambiguous sentence, regardless of its length. That can relate back to proper comma usage as well. Yeah, all the elements that make a sentence clear. Its vocabulary, its use of subordination, coordination, its punctuation, all of those things. Leon asks, can I randomize from a purposeful sample? I don't know what is meant by a purposeful sample there. I can tell you what randomize means. A randomize is a statistical term which relates to how subjects are chosen and how many are chosen. And there are criteria that must be met before that sample can be considered a valid randomized sample. Now, I don't know what is meant by purposeful sample. That sounds like it might come from a field that I'm not familiar with. Can I Google that real fast? I might just not be familiar with that term. Oh, there it is. Purposeful sampling in qualitative research. I will have to read about this and let you know. Also known as purposive and selective sampling. Purposeful sampling is a sampling techniques The qualitative research is used to recruit participants who can provide. Oh, gosh, yes, I get you. Yes. No, that would not be considered randomized at all. Thank you. Yeah. In this case, in my understanding of purposeful sampling, would not be considered randomized because you, the researcher, are making a conscious decision as to who is in and who is not in the sample. And I would say you cannot randomize from that purposeful sample. I might be wrong. But yeah, if anybody else has any other kind of thoughts on that, please let me know. Although I wasn't familiar with that particular term, purposeful sample, I am familiar with that form of sampling or recruiting. I think it's also called, goes by other names, recruitment sample. And it definitely cannot be randomized from. Okay, in fact, Chris is giving a good example of the importance of commas. Very famous one. Money. I did send the link earlier for your research proposal video. Oh, okay, thank you. I will go back up and find it. Gosh, I'm not seeing it. Money. Could you post it again? Money. I'm sorry. I don't see it here. Sorry. Great questions. Let me Google Leong's question. I'm Googling, can you randomize a purposeful sampling? Oh, I got to sneeze. Excuse me. No, you cannot. There are two different kinds of sampling, and don't mix, never worry. So thank you for educating me on that. I realize now that I need to add the phrase purposeful sample to my vocabulary, and that it also means a researched sample or a selective sample. Okay. Money, it still has not shown up. I'm sorry. It has not shown up. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. Thank you for your great questions. Here's money. I am not sure about purposeful, but I did non-probability, yes. Non-probability means that it is not a random sample. In other words, you cannot derive any probability from a purposeful sample, or what is being called here a purposeful sample. Yeah, non-probability purposeful sampling is kind of like redundant in a way. I'm not criticizing the language there. I think the language helps to clarify what is meant. But since purposeful sampling cannot be randomized, you see what I'm saying. Oh, you're welcome, Leon. You're welcome very much, and I wish you the very best in Brunei. I did not know that Filipino or Tagalog was spoken uh, in Brunei. Is that true? What languages are spoken in Brunei? I thought it was Malaysian. I want to get that answer from Leon. I'm really interested. I guess I could Google it, huh? Languages in Brunei. Yeah, it's Malaysian. I thought so. I don't think it's called Malaysian. I think it's called Malay. Ah, there it is. Official language is Malay. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. How many islands are in the Philippine archipelago? I think it's either 9,000 or 5,000. It is the largest archipelago in the world. Number of islands in Philippines. Either 5,000 or 7,000. 7,000. 7,000 islands in the Philippine archipelago. Most of the people, yeah, I wouldn't doubt that, Leon, at all, especially considering its proximity to other countries that speak other languages such as Hindu, Filipino, etc. Yeah, exactly. Affected, Chris. Yeah, it's a little over 7,000. Amazing, isn't it? I want to retire there. I lived there for 2 years when I was in the Navy, and so it's like a paradise to me. I know it's a huge problem with poverty there and and corruption, but I'm willing to help. Okay, well, it's basically the top of the hour. We've had our geography lesson as well as our English lesson. So thank you all again for coming by. It was great to meet some new people and to have such really insightful questions and answers to them. I applaud all of you for your intelligence, your hard work, and your accomplishments as you work on your graduate degrees. Oh, Leon, yes, yes, yeah. Fully affected, Chris says it's beautiful. Yeah, I want to retire in Mindanao, one of the big southern island, the breadbasket of the Philippines, because it has such a wonderful combination of mountains and rivers. I think Mindanao is beautiful. Yeah, Leon, our live sessions are every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern time, which I believe is 4 p.m. Greenwich time, now called UTC time. So it's actually what, gosh, it's like 12 p.m. in Brunei, isn't it? Or it's like actually 1 a.m. in Brunei, isn't it? Bye, Leon. I think it's very late there. Sorry to keep you up. Okay, I'll see all you guys. I think it's even the next day in Brunei.